There's been a lot of talk about drones in Guantanamo. There was a talk a while back by one of the many talks given recently by Obama about mostly about the drones, but that's something we could even talk about later on as well. But he talked about Guantanamo and what is it about this that, because this has been going on and we've been keeping people there that we said we should let go and all that. Why now have you decided to step up and do this?
Why now is because I was, of course, there's 140 of the 166 prisoners there that have been there. Many of them have been there 11 years. I started a hunger strike in, most of them started in February. A couple started in January. And they started their hunger strike to coincide when Obama closed down his office that was set up to facilitate transfers of the prisoners to other countries. He closed it down on January 29th. Then, about a month or two ago, maybe 2.5 months ago, the prisoners were force-fed. They were strapped down, head, chest, stomach, feet, and arms, and force-fed with a tube
down their
up their nose, which is bigger than their nose, so that it creates a lot of blood, because as they're forcing it through the sinus channels, and it goes down in their stomach where they get very sick and they throw up. But it's giving them this Ensure, E-N-S-U-R-E, this food supplement.
Right. Why couldn't they just use a smaller tube?
Well, why don't they release them?
Well, yeah, right, of course.
But at any rate, I read that account about 3 weeks ago. I read the graphic account of how the force feeding works from a lawyer that had gotten into talk with one of his clients there. And he came out and described this process.
His client was one of the striking.
Yeah, well, most of them are on the hunger strike.
Well, yeah.
And there's about 30 of them that are being force fed. And I read that, and it just so turned my stomach
that your country was doing this.
The people that were born and raised in the same country I was born and raised in were both directed to do it by the president and his cronies, and that there were military personnel that were obeying the orders to do this. And it's so barbaric and medieval and diabolical and above the diabolical that I said I have to do something to express my vehement lack of consent to this kind of behavior, and also that it's being done in my name as a U.S. citizen, and I felt I had to do something demonstrative in solidarity with the hunger strikers, who are human beings. And they were snatched out of their countries 11 years ago by hooded men working for the CIA. They were put hoods on them, and then over a long period of time they were transferred from one prison to another while they were being tortured, finally to Guantanamo. The hoods were taken off, and they were someplace I didn't even know, which would happen to be Cuba. And they've never been able to see their families in 11 years. And they don't have any charges, and they have not had any trials. And I thought, now, the Magna Carta goes back 800 years. I mean,
it's 1200 or something.
Yeah, 1215 or something.
Yeah.
And so there's no habeas corpus. And I thought, what would I do if I was considered a dissident and a terrorist, which I was 26 years ago in this country by Reagan? What would I do if somebody snatched me and I couldn't talk to anybody? My family didn't know where I was, and I had been incarcerated and tortured for year after year after year with no contact with the outside world. And then I'm force-fed when I'm trying to actually assert some autonomy over my condition by simply controlling I'm not going to eat. And so they keep them alive in misery, and they won't let them die in dignity, which would the prisoners say, you know, at least I'm prepared to die if I have to. I don't want to, but
they can make that choice for themselves.
Yeah. And so I thought, what would I do if who would be coming to my aid?
Mm-hmm.
I would want.
Not our justice system, that's for sure.
And but not my family didn't even know. You know, most of these people's families didn't know they were there for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, I have to express my own conscience in some way. So I decided to go on I'm in my 19th day. I decided to go on a hunger strike, but on 300 calories a day, which is about a 90% reduction in my calorie intake, in solidarity with the hunger strikers, but also to bring awareness to the issue, which we're doing right now, and that this prison should be closed. It was just a product of the Great War on Terror, GWOT, some people call it, the Great War on Terror, which is an incredible war of terror against much of the world, including the Muslim world, which can only, in the end, create more problems for us, because when you treat people like this, they don't just passively accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Their family structures, their extended families, they're seething in rage because this is happening to them. And so I just feel like, you know, my expression, which may have no impact, but it's my, even if it's just me in the universe, I have to express myself. I just can't, I can just not sit by and just have conversations with people about it. I mean, most people don't even know about it, first of all. To this day, most people don't know much about it. And, but I know about it because I follow the news. And my military experiences 40 years ago kind of sensitized me to the fact that my government's usually lying about whatever it's doing. I learned the hard way. So I'm interested in policies that promote human culture rather than destroy human culture. And of course, this all goes back to 9/11, which we justify all this from 9/11. But of course, we went at war with, we didn't go at war with a country, we went at war with the people. We didn't even consider it a crime to investigate individuals' culpability. We just decided to go on a war against the Muslims. There's 1.5 billion Muslims in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the revival of the Crusades of 800 years ago.
And George Bush even called it that one time.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like this is a barbarism. This is medieval barbarism going on in our name as citizens, which is dehumanizes me. I feel dehumanized knowing this behavior is being imposed on other people by a so-called country that has a constitution and says that they are a nation of laws and not of men. Of course, I know it's BS, that we're really a nation of men in power and not laws, and they decide what laws to apply, when, and how to apply it.
Right, and
I understand that.
And who's above the law.
Right, which is, the power is always above the law, almost always. So that's what it's about. There's, today, a group of the prisoners issued a statement that was published in the United Kingdom's Guardian.
Mm-hmm.
And also in Al Jazeera. And
but
they
not
are,
in ours.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But I found it on the internet this morning, and they're urging access to an independent medical professionals team to intervene to stop the abusive conditions and the torture that's going on. Actually, force feeding in international law is torture. It's in violation of international law.
It specifically states that.
Yes, it does.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, if people are judged to be not lucid, such as very sick people, but they're trying to keep them alive. We're not talking about prisoners now. We're talking about but there is force feeding for people who don't particularly want to be force fed, but are deemed to be too incoherent to make a decision about it. Well, these prisoners are all very coherent, actually, despite the fact
they made that decision.
They made that decision consciously because, well, like here in their letter, here's a quote: "I do not wish to die, but I am prepared to run the risk that I may end up doing so because I am protesting the fact that I have been locked up for more than a decade without a trial, subjected to inhuman and degrading treatment, and denied access to justice. And I turn to a hunger strike as the only way to make the outside world pay attention." And then another part of the letter was, "Whether you continue in the military," talking to the military doctors there at Guantanamo, "or return to civilian practice, you will have to live with what you have done and not done here at Guantanamo for the rest of your life. Going forward, you can make a difference. You can choose to stop actively contributing to the abusive conditions I am currently enduring." You know, so it's beyond the pale. Mm-hmm. It's just beyond the pale. Plus, nobody is questioning, for 11 years now, nobody is questioning the legal or moral authority of the United States to invade Iraq, Afghanistan, and bomb Pakistan.
And
it's
Yemen.
It's all okay after 9/11. It's not okay. It's all violating international law. It's all basically participating in into the supreme international crime of aggression. And all it does in the long run is creates seething rage that is going to be directed at us. Now, why would that is not smart. I
think the people in Boston might agree with you.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, that's where that came from.
So at any rate, that's what the fast is about. We vigil in front of City Hall every day from 3 to 6. There's usually 6 or 8 of us there. We have a big banner which you saw on the screen. I'm there part of the time. My focus is on keeping myself together during the fast. I expect to be on the fast for several more months, maybe longer. It depends somewhat on what happens to the hunger strikers. But I can't see myself coming off the fast without something happening that suggests a change in our policy.
So this is not so much.
It's an indefinite hunger strike.
So it's not necessary to close Guantanamo so much as in solidarity with the hunger strike.
Yes,
there.
it is. But of course, my deeper aim is that the Guantanamo be closed. It's an inhumane criminal enterprise. I mean, it just if people really knew what we were doing. And I spent a year investigating prison brutality at a prison in Massachusetts 30 years ago, Walpole State Prison. I was working for the state senate, and I was dispatched to investigate prison conditions. And even at Walpole, there was torture going on all the time in the cell blocks that were the maximum security cell blocks, especially with prisoners who refused to eat. And they were all force-fed. Some of the prisoners were hung upside down like they were in Abu Ghraib in Massachusetts. And so I got very sensitized to the fact that, and I'm a criminologist and a criminal lawyer by academic training. So how could this be happening? It happens because it's not transparent. Precisely. And the system doesn't want it to be transparent, because if it was transparent, people would be up in arms about it.
If we had a media, then it would be...
If we had a real media...
it would be transparent to some degree.
Yeah. And so, really, the context of all this even goes back further, because on July 3rd, 1979, President Carter funded Contras. Before they were funding the Nicaraguan Contras, they were funding Contras in Afghanistan to overthrow this progressive government that had come to power the year before, that was liberating the women and from having to wear clothes, having to wear any particular clothes. They were all going to be going to school. It was considered a very progressive government, but they were sympathetic with the Soviet Union. And so the United States called them communists.
Mm-hmm.
And so Carter sent in, I forgot how many millions of dollars to fund this contra-operation, which was threatening the existing government. And by December of '79, the Soviets came in to salvage their government, their sympathetic government.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to 11 years of the United States creating and funding the Mujahideen
Mm-hmm.
till 1991.
Which that's where Osama bin Laden came out.
Right,
of.
and Taliban came out of that, and the Taliban are the next generation of the Mujahideen, and Al Qaeda came out of that. So we actually created the seething conditions that led to the hatred
Mm-hmm.
that had to do with our treatment of the Palestinians and our support of Israel and our apartheid. It had to do, we had 45 military bases in the Middle East, 14 of which have been built in the last 14 years, the last 12 years. I mean, they feel totally surrounded and demonized when the United States is involved with so many behavioral policies that are really grotesque and are above the law.
Mm-hmm.
The United States is above the law. If we actually had a mechanism that could enforce the law, Obama and many members of his administration, and Bush too, and many members of his administration, they would be in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, and they have all violated the Nuremberg principles, for which the penalty is depends on the date. It depends on the time and cultural acceptance. It would either be the death sentence or life imprisonment.
Mm-hmm.
This is how serious these crimes are that our country is involved in. It's not something to be taken lightly, but we're above the law. And most people in the United States like to go shopping. That's kind of what they like to do. And that's probably about the only safe thing to do these days without being considered a dissident. I mean, if you're gathering in small groups having conversations about politics, that's suspect.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost...
And they could have a mole in there with you.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're going to go shopping, of course, that's the first thing Colin Powell said after 9/11. A few days later, he said, everything's safe now, you can go shopping.
I didn't know. I knew Bush said it. I didn't know Powell said it.
I remember seeing Powell say
Wow.
that. And I thought, yeah, that's what this country's about. It's about shopping.
Mm-hmm.
If you can go shop, you feel we have freedom. Some freedom.
Some freedom. You know, you're mentioning what we did in Afghanistan, but if my memory serves me correctly, we also overturned democratic governments in Iran and Iraq as well.
Correct.
So
and many
in
other,
the 50s
and many other countries.
and then South America as well. So
Right.
this goes back a lot further than
yes,
just
it goes
recently.
back. The first incident was in '53 we overthrew Mossadegh in Iran.
and brought in the Shah.
Right, brought in the Shah, who was ruthless. And in the next year, we overthrew Cabo Arbenz, who was democratically elected in Guatemala, and put in a puppet. And that has now led to, since '54, to almost 60 years of instability in Guatemala, with probably 250,000 dead as a result.
Mm-hmm.
So we're good at this. This is something the United States has a policy of doing. And since World War II, the U.S. has military intervened on at least 390 occasions in over 100 countries. During what we call the Cold War period, it was really a hot war, but it was a war against mostly the Third World, what we call the Third World, because after World War II, people were beginning to revolt from their colonial histories, from their colonial oppressors. So we were all over the world nobly saying we are preserving democracy from communism, when in fact we were preserving private property and privilege from any kind of socialist or people's movement anywhere on the planet. And I learned that from Vietnam. the hard way, because the independence movement in Vietnam was so powerful, and it was all about preserving the sovereignty of the Vietnamese people from any outside countries. And as you can see from history, it was unacceptable to us. It was unacceptable to the French, because it's a good example of people power, which is threatening to our concept of maintaining global hegemony. So any kind of a powerful people's movement that threatens to sever their ties with dependence upon the West is a threat to our model.
It's by definition communist or socialist, even though it's really basically democratic.
Right, exactly. And it's people-oriented, not materialist-oriented. It's justice-oriented, more a social compact for well-being of the people, rather than in our country we have the well-being of the rich. It's like here, it's like private profit and public decay. I mean, you know, it's like people be damned. And
well, it's austerity and everything that's going on. They call it something else over here, but that's that's
what
it
is. Even call it austerity here. And meanwhile, we spend over $1 trillion a year now on the military and the security budget. More than $1 trillion, maybe $1.3 trillion a year on military spending and intelligence and security. Meanwhile, we're being cut schools, budgets to schools, libraries, human service programs. I mean, it's insane.
It's deliberately insane.
It's deliberately insane. So, coming back to
right, with a good little background, this isn't just something that's just started just now. So it's a good idea to know that.
And of course, I'm a historian. Ever since I got out of Vietnam and knew that I didn't know anything, and even though I was in Vietnam, I was 20. I turned 28 in Vietnam. Embarrassingly so. Not being a lifer, I was drafted at 25. And I had a master's degree when I went to Vietnam, halfway through law school, and I was really dumbed down in a very successful way. And when I realized that in Vietnam, I got angry that I had spent all that time in school and
didn't learn anything.
All that summer jobs paying my tuition and books to have a career, and I realized it was all a lie. And so after Vietnam, I actually became, and still am, a serious student of history, people's history, and it's actually a very satisfying pursuit to understand things from a more radical perspective, meaning a more people's perspective rather than a power perspective.
Well, radical comes from the word root.
Right, go to the root.
So you're getting
go
at the root
to the origins of the issue and the problem. And so that's why I mean, my life is a lot about putting contemporary events in historical context.
You could probably go back to Rome even.
Yes,
you know, the Persian Empire.
You could go back to Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
That's where it all kind of started, in the Sumerian Mesopotamia about 5,500 years ago. That's where we had our first origins of early origins of empire.
And city-states,
and we had the vertical structures, and then we had the slaves and the obedient people. They were either going to willingly believe in the king because he was godlike, or they were going to be forced to with at sword point. Or and so we've been in like a 5,000–6,000 year cycle of obedience to power structures, which did not exist in early Neolithic and all through the Paleolithic period. Remember, this is all part of human evolution, human history. So very recently, really in the timeline of human history.
5,000 years is recent in that timeline.
Right, and so we've been into a model of obedience. Unless you were an indigenous culture that escaped assimilation, and even some of the indigenous cultures got into it, like the Mayans in their later, in their last 200 years of their 1800 year period, they got into very vertical structures with the kings and these basically these pyramids that were all to serve the king, to serve his places for his wealth to be stored, and then his tomb,
And his wives.
Right, and all his wife. And so, it doesn't work. This is what history shows us. If we don't have basic horizontal power sharing, and most people being involved, participating in their lives, sooner or later it becomes oppressive. And now in this country, I have to say honestly, we are now in a totalitarian state.
Mm-hmm.
It has gotten to that point. And here we have Bradley Manning, who's going to trial on Monday. He's been in prison for 3 years. And what he did was he revealed the truth about what we were doing in Iraq.
Just what the hunger strikers are trying to do,
Exactly.
basically.
And in the law, again, I am a member of the bar, although I haven't practiced in a long time, and I don't intend to, because I don't believe in the law. I don't believe in the legal system. But in the law, when you are in the military, the Uniform Code of Military Justice has a provision that says you must identify and share if you have knowledge of war crimes and crimes against humanity being committed while you're in the military, by your unit, by your superiors, and any orders to the contrary, telling you to shut up, are not valid orders. Now, the fact is, you're not going to get any protection from the American legal system or the UCMJ. And Bradley Manning revealed thousands of cables from WikiLeaks that WikiLeaks had produced, and Manning was trying to get this information to the Washington Post, the New York Times. They wouldn't take it. And he had that video footage of the Apache helicopter in 2007 with the audio on of the air crew talking about how happy they were that they just killed these people.
They were begging to kill them.
They were begging to kill them.
Yeah.
And that was revealed.
Collateral murder was
right.
Folks want to look at that. It's collateral murder.
And in fact, all the drone strikes are murder. They're not collateral murder. They're premeditated murder directed at people who have been listed by the White House secretly as being targets for that week, because Obama, Tuesdays is his day for looking at who's going to be targeted that week, that day, really. So, at any rate, we're a lawless society, but nonetheless, sometimes I like to remind people in the system that this is the rhetoric. I learned in law school that we are a nation that lives by these codes, these laws. And I know that you don't take them seriously, but we did have a process by which these laws were established that ostensibly reflected the mores of a society. And of course we treat the law with contempt. And here's Bradley Manning going to trial in a military court-martial, and they're going to bring 144 witnesses in. The prosecution is to show that he aided the enemy, which is punishable by death.
That's what they're still trying to do that then.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to accept life imprisonment. But here's a guy that actually upheld the law and his conscience.
The epitome whistleblower.
And he should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
There's been talk of that, I understand.
And so here it's very Orwellian. But this is the age we're in, and I have to say again, I think we have to call it a totalitarian state now. Call it a fascist state. Corporations basically protected by the government to go anywhere on the planet at any time to plunder whatever they want, and the U.S. military will protect them. And here we have a president that is capable of choosing who's going to get killed, when they're going to be killed, where they're going to be killed, whenever he wants to, with no accountability whatsoever. Now, what would you call that? I mean, that is, there's no habeas corpus. It's been eliminated with the Patriot Act and with the National Defense Authorization Act. eliminated it even for U.S. citizens.
Oh, the NDAA, yeah.
Eliminated for U.S.
for
citizens. Can be indefinitely detained if the president thinks you're a terrorist threat. Well, I was identified as a terrorist threat in 1986. Now, if that was happening today...
And all it takes to be identified as a terrorist is for him to say so.
Exactly. So, come on, this is our society? Yeah. This is the society I grew up in. I was valedictorian in my school. I was honor society. I was student council. I was president of my Baptist Youth Fellowship. I was an all-conference athlete.
You're a Republican?
I was a Republican. Went on to college and graduate school because I lived in America, the greatest country in the history of the world. And then I wound up participating in atrocities in Vietnam. And then when I brought that to the attention of my superiors, they laughed at me and ultimately brought charges against me, which they did not follow through on. This was 1969-70. Bringing an officer like me to a court-martial in 1970 would have given me a forum to talk about what I witnessed. And the anti-war movement was percolating along then, and it was just giving them bad publicity. I might have done time, but I would have at least been able to share my story where there was actually media covering it.
Media was covering the anti-war movement back then. It isn't now.
So, at any rate, my expression, modest as it is, 300 calorie a day diet indefinitely in solidarity with the hunger strikers and in trying to raise the attention about why Guantanamo should be closed immediately, may not have any effect. I do not know. But I can't wait to see measurable effects when I feel the way I do about this kind of sadistic behavior that is totally uncalled for, being imposed on other human beings by other human beings that grew up in families like I did. My family was a right wing. But at some point you realize, wow, this just is not right. This is grotesque. It's sickening. It dehumanizes people. It dehumanizes me, knowing this is happening in my name. I can't stop it, but I can share it with the universe and whoever's willing to listen. And we do have 2 other hunger strikers on the East Coast on indefinite fasts. Diane Willson, who's been in Washington, she's now in Texas, where her sister just died, attending to her sister's funeral. And we have another member of Veterans for Peace, and Diane's a member of Veterans for Peace too. She's also a co-founder of Code Pink.
Oh, okay.
And Elliot Adams, who's a former president of Veterans for Peace, he's fasting in his little town near Albany, New York, and is all indefinite. And we're trying to get more people interested in fasting to raise this issue. We're trying to get more religious leaders involved, more medical personnel involved, more psychological professional people involved to say, when are we going to bring some sanity to our policy? It's going on 11 years.
Way too long.
11 years. Can you imagine being locked up for 11 years, never having talked to your family, not being tried? And you should read the accounts of how the guards treat these guys at Guantanamo.
Probably not as bad as Abu Ghraib.
Probably not, but anytime a prisoner wants to use a phone, which is rare, or see their lawyer, they have to be shackled out to a little meeting room, and they have to go through 3 or 4 versions of body searches, which the guards are doing sadistically, in your anus, in your penis, and the way they open your mouth and stick things down your throat to see if you got anything in your... I mean, that's unnecessary in and of itself. I mean, why is the administration of Guantanamo, which of course works for the president, why are they even allowed to treat the prisoner? It's enough that they've been locked up in solitary for 11 years, but when they want to move to the phone, they get occasionally, I think 1 every 2 months or something, you're able to get a phone, payphone. or when their lawyers have spent a lot of effort to get to see them because the government has put up a lot of obstacles.
A lot of hoops.
So a lot of the prisoners have decided now not to even visit their lawyers or ask for a phone call because they're tortured in the process of getting to their lawyer or to the phone.
Which is probably what they want anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know what? You know, just listening to you speak, I mean, any of the viewers and myself included, is it can't help but make you mad, and it makes me doubly mad at the media, which could be putting a stop to this just by shining the light on it, and they're not doing it. I mean, they talk about it, and then you got somebody like you mentioned, Code Pink. Did you see? Medea Benjamin raising hell. If viewers want to check this out, Medea Benjamin raising hell with
3 times
with Obama when he was doing his little
at the National Defense University last week in Washington D.C. His Guantanamo talk, which was just again empty rhetoric. He's Obama, as I call him.
He's slick though.
Oh, he's incredibly slick. He's better than Clinton ever was, and Clinton was pretty good. Obama, as I call him.
Slick Willie.
He is so eloquent, and he's so articulate, and his rhetorical style is so pleasing. And he says a number of things, and if you had 2 different people who had very different opinions about issues, each person would think that the president had agreed with them or supported their position. He's able to actually make everybody feel like he's on their side.
He's on their side.
And
that's what.
And it's empty rhetoric. It doesn't. It's just but he is a master at it.
That's why they put him in place.
Exactly. He's a brand.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a perfect brand.
He is. You know, I see that we've got. I think we might have a phone call here. Would you be interested to hear a comment or a question?
Sure.
We got this phone call. Let's just put it up there.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to the program. You have a question or comment?
No, I don't have a question. I would like to congratulate Brian Willson for what he does, because we must have gratitude for anyone who does something like this. And,
the control room needs to turn that up a little. We can barely hear him.
Okay,
go on ahead.
I speak normally.
Oh, there you are. We hear you well now.
Okay, I was saying that I would like to congratulate Brian Willson for what he's doing, because he's doing it on behalf of all of us. I like to have a note of optimism, but also a note of pessimism, and this is not so much for the media. I am involved in making presentations, sometimes even at small clubs. And when I see all these people standing up and putting their hand on their heart and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, it shivers me I get a shiver in my veins, not because the allegiance in itself is a bad idea, but because today it stands for exactly the horrors that so eloquently Brian has described. So there's not much more to say. The only other thing that I would like to add is that probably Brian agrees with me too, the Muslims today have become the left of the world, in a way that is absolutely absurd, because they're not a communist. They're not a communist ideology, religion in any way, but they have become the left of the world, and so in some way, the clash of civilization that was predicated by Bush has become another battle against the left, a somewhat vague left, but it stands in a way for all of us. Regrettably, it has to be this way. So I want to leave some room for something else, but thank you. It's wonderful that you do it. I hope that you keep well. You look well, a little bit, but
good so far.
Good work, and let's hope that somebody wake up someday. Regrettably, the media wants to convert all American families into Simpson families, and they're getting there almost.
Well said.
So when that happens, well, there'll be few of us left, but the Simpsonization of the American family is on the way and is getting there at a fast pace. So thanks again.
All right.
Wonderful program. Beautiful. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. You know, imagery is important, and that Simpson, that said a lot.
You know, in this country, we seem to always talk about we want to be positive, we want to be upbeat, but you know, telling the truth is positive, but it's often painful. So this idea of, can you be, you know, I hear this from conversations I have a lot. Well, we have to have a positive message. And I say, well, to me, telling the truth is the most positive thing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And if the truth is very painful, then that's something for you to grapple with. This is I'm telling the truth. I'm not bullshitting. I mean, I was part of BS for a long time. And then after I was betrayed in the military and realized what a bunch of lies on top of lies on top of lies, I felt, you know, my only way of staying sane and to be politically on a good path and being healed is I have to tell the truth about what I know. Mm-hmm. It's not the truth, but it's the truth as I know it. And it's very hard for people in this country to hear things that are painful because we're so used to being optimistic or on top, and which of course is dangerous because we have never learned humility. We're a very arrogant nation.
From the very beginning.
From the very beginning. I mean, we were founded on arrogance. We were founded on genocide, and we had to tell a lie about that. We had to say we came to an empty land, and we found savages, and we had to eliminate them to enhance development of the land. Well, ever since then, we've been telling one lie after another to pretend that we're an okay society, when in fact we were born in shame, which we do not want to address. And I think we will not survive as a nation if we don't address it. And that's okay. We probably need to collapse. The destructive nature of industrial civilization, exemplified most demonstrably by the United States, is on a collision course with life itself. Mm-hmm. And the sooner it collapses, the better chances a few of us, or I'm sure the bacteria and the cockroaches will survive, but you know, I would like human culture to survive. But human culture has been built for hundreds of thousands of years on archetypal characteristics of cooperation, mutual respect, empathy, and a sense of fairness. That was until a few thousand years ago. And those are still deeply embedded in us as humans. Mm-hmm. Those make for human culture, a functioning human culture that is not at war with itself.
And the equality of the genders, too.
Exactly.
And with like the matriarchal societies.
So we need a partnership society. So at any rate, I try to understand this long view, which enables me to at least see that we have in us the characteristics that are indispensable for survival. Cooperation. Can't live without cooperation with other people. We're wired as social beings. We can't live without empathy, which is the root of cooperation. Mm-hmm. We are all connected at the feelings level. So in capitalism, I learned the opposite. I didn't know anything about this except what I was being taught, and I was good at it up until I got to Vietnam. You taught individualism, competition, and acquisition. In other words, you're an individual and you compete for a place in society so you can buy a lot of things. Acquisition. But in reality, our true nature is to be cooperative, interacting with other people in a cooperative way, and inquisitive, meaning we have to ask questions. I didn't ask any questions until I got into Vietnam. I didn't even know I had the capacity to, and then I haven't stopped since.
Well, that's how you learn. I'm getting the thing. We got one more. Speaking of asking questions, we have another call. We'll try one more phone call. You're on the air. You just got a short time here.
Okay, I just got a short little piece I'd like to say.
All right.
We do not need to bequeath the ignorance that we inherited from the generation before us. All these poisons that we're killing each other with, and these GMO foods, these chemtrails, the fluoridated water, and people just sit passively by and watch it. And your guest was speaking about how when you speak the truth, that's the truth you know. And it hurts when you try and tell the loved ones that you're actually trying to protect from these dangers, and they kind of ostracize you because they don't want to be associated with, let's just say, a conspiracy theorist as being a person who would question a government that has lied to them so often. And it's good to see people speaking out, but we do not need to leave the ignorance that we inherited.
Well,
thank you for the program.
All right, very well put and very powerful. We're down to a minute and a half, so we might we could go on forever. All this is important, but it is important to let folks know what you're doing and where every day.
So Monday through Friday, we vigil with a big Guantanamo banner that you saw at the beginning of the show in front of Portland City Hall from 3 to 6.
That's every day, 7 days a week?
No, it's Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays it varies. So we're going to probably be at Pioneer Square most Saturdays from 3 to 6. We will be tomorrow afternoon. If there's special events on Saturdays where there's a lot of gathering of people,
like the Monsanto March?
Yeah, we might be there. Sundays are a day off, so there's no vigil. Now, I'm fasting 7 days a week. In fact, 1 day a week I don't eat anything. So today, Friday, is my water-only day. I don't eat. I only eat 6 days a week, 300 calories
All right,
a day.
well, we got about 30 seconds left. Brian, I wish we could go on and on. There's a lot of important stuff you're talking about, and I think this whole thing about, we're a nation of laws, what we are, we're a nation of the sword. And we know what happens to nations that live by the sword.
Exactly.
And
you die by the sword.
You die by the sword. And we're going down that road. And I hate to see it happen. And I woke up too, not in Vietnam, but I woke up the same way. And it's hard. I want to thank the crew. We're out of time. Tune in next week. Thank you very much.